You're hanging out in the House of Sunny podcast, where it's always sunny, mostly because of your host, comedian and YouTuber, Sunny Lohman. Want to know what Sunny and her friends are thinking about this week? Well, here she is, Sunny Lohman.
Hey everybody, welcome to the House of Sunny podcast. We're back again. This is election week. And so Doug and I are going to tell you who we're going to vote for. Like it's a big surprise. I think we've been pretty clear in the last year who we're going to vote for. But we're going to make the case today for voting, first of all, because I have a lot of friends and people I respect who are saying they're just not going to vote. And then the second thing is who to vote for, which, okay, ready? Announcement. I'm voting for Trump. Actually, I already did. What about you, Doug?
Voted yesterday for Trump.
Sweet. Cha-ching, MAGA.
Right, baby.
I was telling you the other day, I went into drop my daughter's glasses off to get lenses put in them in some glasses shop in Laguna Beach, which will remain nameless. So I go in there, I drop off the glasses, and I'm just wearing like a nondescript. It's not a MAGA hat, but it was like a baseball cap it was a camel color with an American flag on it, which is now the secret handshake. Mm-hmm. Totally. Any American flag is like the secret handshake, which is sad. If you're on the left, you have abandoned the American flag. You have abandoned the ideals of free speech and equality and all of the things that they claim to be for. They have abandoned it, and we have picked it up. Like, we're like, yeah, that's our symbol. The symbol of freedom is our symbol. And so it's a secret handshake because I go in there, I'm not even thinking about my hat, and I do the transaction, and I'm walking out or about to walk out, and she says pointedly, "I like your hat." I'm like,
ooh.
I go, MAGA, and I walked out.
Mic drop.
I knew what she meant. I like your hat meant I'm voting for Trump. I'm on the Trump train.
Wow, that was really dangerous speech, too.
Mm-hmm.
You endangered everybody in there.
You're not allowed to like the American flag.
Very dangerous stuff.
It's taboo. If you're a Bolshevik schmuck like the Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey,
oh God.
I'm just gonna show his picture and then we can goof on him. Okay, let's see. Share screen.
I think Tucker called him a peyote man, a peyote guy.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Look at this guy. Look at this clown.
Jesus, is that a nose ring?
That's a nose ring. Look at that freaking beard and look at his bloodshot eyes.
He looks like he just got out of hostage situation, like those guys that came out of the Middle East.
He's wearing a creepy, tight charcoal gray suit with all of this. Like, I mean, he looks like
Bergdahl.
He looks like a poor Russian intellectual. That's what he looks like. Like I'm sure he's studying that. Like, this is a studied look of communist. Because what else is it? Look at this clown. This guy is making decisions. This guy's blocking the New York Post. Look at that dipshit. I read something today that's important to remember. These people only exist because of us. Like, whom is in charge of whom? Let's just remember that, okay? Anyway, we're free. We are free people. We still live in America.
Well, according to him, though, in the hearing, I don't think he claims no one's in charge of their policy. If you hear what he said,
he just lied through his teeth.
But no,
right?
Of course. But what he actually said was they don't really have a policy. They just rely on other people to call out speech. That's what he said.
What do you mean? I guess I missed that part. He said they just wait for people to report people and then they just make a decision.
Yeah, because they said, how is this a violation of your terms of service? And he said, it's really not. They said, well, what's the policy? And he said, we don't really have a policy. He said
But that's bullshit. I mean,
we
that's just
just
a
call.
lie.
He said we rely on people to call this out. We just rely on other people to call the speech out.
Maybe they do. I mean, I'm sure there are Twitter. They probably get a report on every tweet ever made. You know what I'm saying? Like somebody's reporting somebody all the time. But then when they make a decision to block or flag or suppress, it's definitely a lefty decision, because there are endless examples of, like Ted Cruz. I watched the one clip where Ted Cruz said, no one elected you. And in that, Ted Cruz brought up that the New York Times was able to post all of this stuff unproven about Donald Trump's tax returns, which is releasing someone's tax returns is an obvious felony. And then here you have the New York Post story, like, hey, here are the documents and they're legit and it's from a laptop, and here's the laptop store owner's name, and like everything was transparent. And they blocked it so it's a complete double standard. They do have a standard. It's just that they're lying. What kills me is that there are still people out there that go, oh no, it's equally, there's no prosecution of conservatives. Because, and one of the reasons that people still get away with saying that is because these guys have never admitted that they're biased. They've never admitted that. They still go in front of Congress and lie and say, oh no, we just have a policy. It's neutral. It's our terms of service. The New York Post. Did you check that doublespeak when he said, we're not, the New York Post still can't post. Like their account is still
blocked.
But all they have to do is go in and delete the story we want them to delete.
Yeah.
They can have their Twitter account. But, and then in the same sentence, he's like, oh, we realized that was a mistake. We realized it was a mistake to block this story and block the New York Post within 24 hours. And Cruz is like, but they're still blocked. Oh, but they can have an account. They just have to delete the story that we supposedly mistakenly blocked.
All you have to do is say what we want you to say, and you're free to speak whatever you want, as long as you say what we want.
But they're also saying we made a mistake blocking that story. And then simultaneously saying the Post can have their account back anytime as long as they delete that story. It's like in the same sentence he says that. I mean, the cognitive dissonance but does he know he's lying? Is he like aware of it? I guess I don't really care. But it's a bald-faced lie, and it allows other people to get away with this BS that they censor equally, and they don't. And oligarchy slayer, yes, I use the word censor. Like, okay, last week we talked about these guys, and we talked about it based on a really well-written comment that I received on my YouTube. But now the guy's just gone off the rails, and now he's just like, just rude. I'm not gonna respond to any more of his comments because he's rude. And I'm open to discussion as long as now he's threatening me and stuff, saying I'll know what to do, and then like putting a sword up. Oh, I'm part of the oligarchy. Oligarchy slayer who's like okay with big tech censoring all the. Oh my God! You should change your name to oligarchy supporter. Oligarchy soldier. That's your new name.
So Dorsey said, quote, "We don't have a general policy around misleading information and misinformation. We rely upon people calling that speech out," unquote.
Yeah, but it's just not true. I mean,
of course.
Okay. I mean maybe ridiculous. They get reports, but then how they decide what they decide to do with it is 100% according to a leftist ideology.
Yeah, so. It was interesting. The other thing that like caught my eye was how acquiescent, is that a word?
Use it in a sentence, and then I'll tell you. Finish your sentence.
How acquiescent Zuckerberg is to regulation. And he was almost seemingly begging for regulation. And, they put on this facade that, they're all about transparency, and they want to get better. The one thing that he said that I think is really the crux of this whole thing, and it was a throwaway line that probably no one paid attention to, is he said, You know, we want to make the platform, you know, we want to endorse freedom and, you know, encourage free speech and open communication, whatever, and balance it with safety. And
Yeah,
we have to be careful of harmful content.
these are the
And
people.
so my point is that that's the whole problem. They define
Right.
harmful content as anyone that disagrees with them. That's
Right.
that's the definition of
It's
harmful.
unsafe not to be a communist.
And
That's
so
what it comes down to. And they actually just to throw, like, sweep all of this away. These guys consider what the World Health Organization says as safe, what the President of the United States says as unsafe. So the president and their health authorities come after the World Health Organization. And the World Health Organization is a UN body. And we used to all agree and understand that the UN is like a completely corrupt cesspool. I mean, the Human Rights Committee at the UN is run by Saudi Arabia and like Iran and like Russia. So hello, the WHO is also corrupt. And well, so is the United States health industry. But still, I mean, these are the choices that they're making. You know, you're not allowed to discuss vaccine safety because just discussing it is unsafe. According, you know, and they get to decide.
but this is the point, is that this is not their job. Their
right.
job
I don't even
is,
want to argue the specifics, right?
I mean, their job is not
Stop.
to moderate
Right.
and to fact check you. That's the job of an editor. Like if you're writing an article for a newspaper, your editor fact checks you and says, no, you have to put more context around this claim, or you have to support this claim. That's not what a platform is supposed to be doing. They're a platform. They are not a publisher. And that's exactly what they're doing. Like I got a notice today that I posted something about Biden literally said, well, in a speech the other day, that he was running against George Bush. And so I posted a little clip, he thinks he's running against George Bush. That post was flagged by Facebook, and I was told that there wasn't enough context put around it or something like that.
It's unsafe, Doug. It's unsafe to make fun of Joe Biden.
It's like, who the F are you to
Yeah.
tell me that?
Right. Well, just build your own platform, Doug. I got a message from, or somebody posted like an article by the GAB CEO or something, who was saying, you know, just whatever. I can't even remember now what he was saying, but you sent that? Okay.
Yeah.
I think it was you, because he was saying, don't fall for this repeal 230 stuff. It's actually what they want. Instead, we need to hold them accountable to it, because it's actually protections for people. So I don't really understand. I mean, I'm no lawyer, but I'm reading through this piece that he wrote, and we'll link to it. We'll put that in the links. I'm just trying to move quickly past this, but he kind of describes all the deplatforming that he and that his company GAB and himself and personally, like, he was DeMastercarded, and you know, GAB has been through hell. They had to build their own ISP in order to exist.
Can I read this real quick? He says,
I don't have time for it. I don't have time for it. So we'll link to it. But the laundry list of what GAB has been through just to stay in existence. And then they say, oh yeah, just build another company. And that's obviously BS. Also, I wanted to mention that on October 15th, YouTube deleted a massive amount of YouTube accounts. A huge amount of YouTube accounts. And of course, they're all right-sided accounts, conservatives, Christians, just deleted them. A lot of those accounts had no strikes against them. It was just a huge mass YouTube deplatforming that occurred. I wonder why, on October 15th. And now those people are just really hard to find. I mean, they're all, like, a lot of them are probably on BitChute. But one person I follow who was deplatformed is Amazing Polly. I don't know if you watch her stuff.
She's the best.
She does a lot of research. She's a researcher. She's blown open this healthcare cabal. Her videos are so good. And she's now on BitChute, and trying to like build now her subscriber base over there. And BitChute is kind of clunky, and a lot of these alt tech companies don't have apps because the app store, Google and Apple are blocking them from having apps. So they're just harder to use. BitChute's video thing doesn't work as well. It's going to be frustrating for a while. Like I love watching video on time and a quarter or something so I can get through them more quickly. And now I'm having to watch it, like all this stuff slowly. It's driving me crazy. I'll probably have to download this stuff and like figure out a way to get my own player that will do things at time and a half, because I just can't consume the same amount of stuff. And of course, by design, I mean, this is how you silence people. So that's pretty creepy. You can go over there to this, I'll link to this, but there's this one guy who was deplatformed who's over on BitChute who actually did a video and listed all these, and he's continuing to keep track of all the people who've now been deplatformed. And it's kind of like a good list of who to follow and how to find these people if you're interested. It's just really a weird time. And for people to say it's not censorship, that there's something really fundamentally wrong with your brain. If you can't process the reality of the situation, it's not a word. It's not about the word censorship, right? It's the act of mass over multiple platforms and banking, getting rid of people. Amazing Polly said on her video, the day that she was deplatformed by YouTube, the next day she was deplatformed by PayPal. Is that a coincidence?
Wow.
And she said, and there was more. I haven't had a chance to finish watching her video. She says she's been under tech harassment ever since her YouTube deplatforming. And of course, she's now has no voice. She had hundreds of thousands of subscribers on YouTube, only 10,000 new subscribers on BitChute since she was deplatformed. And so now, of course, she has a smaller audience to complain to and to inform and say, PayPal just deplatformed me. And she makes money based on people sending her, patrons. So probably a huge amount of her income was coming in through PayPal, maybe on a monthly subscriber thing that they have,
Well, I think censor is actually the right word and maybe doesn't even capture it enough, because the intention of big tech is part of a totalitarian movement to eventually legislate against free speech. So, the unlike in Europe and Canada, where there are hate speech codes, where they are slowly eroding all civil liberties and ability to speak freely, we still have a semblance of free speech in this country because they haven't gone the full mile and invalidated so-called hate speech, which is criticizing Islam or criticizing the Democrats. So they're part of that movement which seeks to impose those kinds of controls in the United States. And so seen as part of the movement in which they are normalizing and sort of desensitizing us to this idea that conservative speech, dissenting speech, right-wing speech is harmful, dangerous, suspicious, unsafe, whatever, physically destructive, that they want to get rid of it, that they have to ban it, they have to silence them. And so it's not a long leap from that kind of cultural ripening to a legislative agenda on the part of AOC and her ilk to institute that in law. Now, will it be struck down by the Supreme Court? Well, I guess that depends, but the point is that as of right now, these people are part of a movement.
It's clever. It's clever as hell. And it reminds me of Cass Sunstein in his Nudge book that was so popular. It's clever because it's being done with private companies. But another article I'm going to link to, and you've read and I've read recently, is a 2010 article by Angelo Codevilla, who writes now in City Journal. I think this one is in a different place, but in 2010, he wrote this article and I just read it. And I mean, I read this guy, I follow him, but I never read this piece. And it was back in 2010, before I was aware of him. He basically predicts Trump as a phenomenon because he says, you know, you have basically our society, and he goes through the entire history of the United States. And he says, our society is ruling class versus the people. That's what's going on. That's the divide. And the people are not represented by the Republicans anymore. And they're getting agitated. And eventually there's going to be something's going to happen here with the Republican Party and this lack of them actually listening to their constituency. And they've gerrymandered their way into not having to, but still, you know, eventually that doesn't last. So here we are with Trump, and it's just a really amazing article to read, not only as it predicts Trump and explains the sort of wider historical political situation, but because it really does put it into two categories. And you really can see that the ruling class is, which sounds like a conservative conspiracy theory or something, but it is the political class. But it also then now includes and has included the university intellectuals, big tech, Silicon Valley, this kind of like, it's not even about money and it's not even about political power. He's saying it's about ideology, because you can be a politician with power like Ronald Reagan and be on the outs. You're part of the out group because you're not part of this group that views the people as not equal and needing to be led and needing to be guided, because you're so wrong. You know, left to your own devices, you're just going to create too much chaos and you're racist and you're stupid. And they really view themselves as it's necessary for you to be controlled. They're literal authoritarians. And the crazy irony of today is that they have the moral high ground, or they take it, you know, like somehow we're the bad people because we want to leave people alone. Meanwhile, you're the, you know, AOC with her freaking, I mean, if anybody has moral certainty, it's her, right? The way she, nah, 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 nah.
Oh, she's the worst.
And she's a little thug. She's like a little robber. And she's telling you that you should give her your wallet. You know, like, you should do what I say because I know better than you because you're stupid and racist.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, she's an idiot. And the guy Codevilla says in his piece, at least in France, you have to pass an exam to be a civil servant and a politician. Like, you actually have to be one of the smart people in society. Whereas here, they're actually dumbing it down. And you can see that in these crude, potty-mouthed, you know, just gross people. I mean, look at Dorsey with his freaking beard. He's got some sort of poor Bolshevik worship. And he's taking the moral high ground saying, well, that just isn't safe for you to discuss that. It's not safe for you to discuss Joe Biden and his corruption.
Yeah, the Codevilla article, especially, it goes back all the way to the 19th century and talks about the philosophical premises that led through the progressive era and throughout the 20th century. And he really creates this historical narrative where there's this ruling class of these progressive philosopher kings that are quote unquote scientific and expert, and against the retrograde, racist, dysfunctional deplorables. And that, you know, the job of the state is to command and control these otherwise, this otherwise dysfunctional rabble. And so, you know, he takes that all the way up through Obama's term and the Bush-Clinton transition, you know, through the economic crisis of 2008 when they were bailing out those companies. And remember, that's really what precipitated the Tea Party was the sense that, the Republicans and the Democrats were one party. They were the ruling class, bailing out their friends.
Bailing out, and it was obvious, like, because they bailed out some companies, didn't bail out others. It was gross, and it was $1 trillion
Right. And
of handouts, which now are normal. Like that just happened this year.
Nothing.
3 trillion to 3 trillion in coronavirus to various, and Trump is part of that now too. Like of all the things and I didn't really expect him to be good on this because he's obviously one of these big businessmen who likes government stepping into the economy. He thinks economy should be controlled somewhat by the government in like big ways. He like wants to deregulate, but then he wants to do handouts and other things like that. That's unfortunate, and we're still waiting for our true champion. But what's great about Trump is his pushback culturally. And I think he emboldens people who will eventually be our true champions for real freedom. Because you first have to break through the stigma of the racist and the rube. I mean, we first had to break through that stigma, and I think we have. I think that the right is really excited and they're not taking that shit anymore. They're not falling for it anymore. And I think Trump is a big reason why they've stopped hiding and being sort of paralyzed by the racism accusation.
Right. Because he represents more than anyone, even though in a flawed way, represents the deplorables. You can see that even in his campaign rallies where he's hamming it up and he's talking to people in the crowd and calling out, supporters and friends and local politicians and stuff. And, it's so American the way he goes through these rallies and the way in which he speaks and talks and champions those people. And, of course, is he a laissez-faire, free market libertarian type guy like we would love to see? No, but, culturally, he is the antithesis of the Washington elite ruling class. He is anathema to that, and that's why they hate him.
And more than that, it's not just that he's anathema. He has the strength of character or the narcissism, I don't know, I don't care which, to withstand the onslaught from the in-group, the authoritarian in-group, and he's getting it from all sides. The politicians are plotting against him. The intelligence community are plotting against him. They're going after his family, the media. He's so hated. The universities, the rallies, the riots, it's insane. Silicon Valley, everybody's against him. And he doesn't back down on his refusal to accept, to like go, oh, I'm sorry, to apologize for his existence, I think is what he will never do.
Yeah, he's not cowed by them.
He may be stopped. They may have been successful in roadblocking him and his agenda, but they haven't like reached inside his soul and gotten him to like feel guilty, because he just doesn't. And so that's been really important. And as we continue to make the case for Trump here, I think that to me, even when he was in the primaries and I hated him and I was like totally for Cruz and I thought he was just a bully and icky and I thought he was a Democrat and I thought he would get into office and do nothing good and flip-flop and be a complete schmuck. And it turned out I was wrong. Although I couldn't have known that, I think. Although some people did, I guess. But even back then, the one thing I liked about him, which I still like today, is his cultural pushback. The fact that he doesn't apologize for America, that he doesn't feel guilty. He doesn't have that guilt that a lot of people in America have. And it's been really refreshing. And it's been a huge, look at the rallies and the boat parades and this isn't about Trump. This is about people being unleashed and free to say, it's okay to be conservative. It's okay to want freedom and to be American. Like the t-shirt or the signs that went around, it's okay to be white. It's such a genius sign to put up on campuses where everything's about color worship, And
Yeah,
Trump has unleashed people. It's not about him. It's about unleashing people to be able to say who they are without guilt.
yeah, in the face of constant haranguing
Yeah.
from the ruling class. And
Constant moral righteous BS.
and when you step back from the political policy shit, that's sort of almost trivial today, and you look at the very big picture, what do we have? We have a ruling class, Washington, deep state bureaucracy that wants to control the population, control America, gain ever more power over the money, our economy, every aspect of our lives, our health. And, that those people are on both sides. They're on the Republican and Democrat side. More on the Democrat side, but there's certainly, the Rhino Republicans that are totally
the Lincoln Project, and
a part of
yeah.
that ruling class establishment elite that want to control you. Or maybe their focus is different. Maybe they want to spread American power across the globe and take over other countries and tell other people how they should choose their own governments and so on and so forth, and waste our military, risk our military, all over the globe for their, the neocon mold. So you've got this establishment power that operates in many different ways, many different levels, but they all agree on one thing, which is that they need to be in control. They need your money, and they want to tell you what to do. And the big tech stuff culturally is a part of that ruling class. It's the desire or the belief that there's this, philosopher king, council of scholars at Twitter and Facebook or in DC that know best what you're allowed to see, what you're allowed to read, what
nice
you can
anthem reference.
Thank you.
Council of Scholars. Yeah.
and he's, however flawed policy wise he is, which he's very flawed. We've added more to the national debt this year than Obama did his entire 8 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I totally agree with that.
Him.
It doesn't, he is the only pushback we have right now against that movement culturally.
Right. But I think it's a first step. It was a necessary first step. How is the guy, like I've said this before, I mean, Ted Cruz is more ideologically, the right person. Unfortunately, he's a bit of a politician and a compromiser when it comes to the cultural stuff. So he's the wrong guy.
He wouldn't have won.
Well, let's say he did. He would have folded like a cheap suit as soon as the barrage, because he doesn't have the cultural lack of guilt that Trump has. He doesn't have that.
Yeah.
I saw him condemn Proud Boys the other day. Trump won't condemn the Proud Boys. He hasn't done it. He's like, hey, I don't know. And like, he's kind of playing like he doesn't know, but at least he's not saying I condemn the Proud Boys. And Cruz did. Cruz knows better. And he's doing it because of the cultural pressure. And he thinks that it's going to make the other stuff that he says more palatable if he gives them the cultural high ground, then he can sneak in freedom. And it just doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. So Trump, we need the cultural thing first, because we have to free up. Ideological people have to be freed up from the cultural, the crushing cultural stigma of being for freedom.
That's a great point. The politics will follow the cultural trend, not the other way around.
That's right.
You can't start, in other words, with the libertarian political program, because no one gets that. And if you don't explain it or culturally ripen people to believe it, have belief in self-responsibility, self-reliance, voluntary trade, not kowtowing to the elites and the experts and the establishment, that you're in control of your own life and you want your freedom and you want to voluntarily interact with people, and that's morally ideal and that's great, and we're going to wave flags and love our communities and our country. But you need all that first, and then you can
That's right.
implement these other things, because in the context of those beliefs, you can say, hey, we believe in free speech, we believe in free trade, we believe in these other things. You can't start in a cultural context where, you know, the academic left and the comedians in Hollywood and the media, everybody is on the side of ruling class socialism. You can't say, well, you know, if we privatize the post office, we'll be more efficient, you know, which is sort of like that, the libertarian approach over the decades of like trying to explain to people why, you know, free market economics benefits everybody. And it's just never worked, because you're not putting the culture and the moral ideal first.
It's not even that people haven't been able to say, and they're not addressing the cultural and the moral aspect first. They're not addressing that, but that they actually inside feel guilty for it. Like there's actually been a psychological, I mean, no one wants to be a racist. So they've been like, okay, I need to, like, you know, concede that the cops must be attacking Black people because I don't want to be a racist. And I think people like Heather McDonald, who is, and not to say that the ideas aren't necessary. So what I'm trying to say is what Trump has done is allowed people who make the intellectual case, like Heather McDonald, he has made those people more popular and freed them, allowed their voices to be magnified by removing the cultural stigma of someone on that side. And we're seeing an ideological renaissance on the right. We're really seeing that. Look at all the researchers and commentators and writers and podcasters and video makers, and the right has exploded with content. And I mean, post-Trump, really, in particular, although before that it was growing. I mean, I think it was growing, but then he's really done a lot to unleash it just by being guilt-free. And the next guy after Trump is going to be way more ideological, I think. And I've heard objectivists say, one prominent objectivist in particular, Yaron Brook, said, you know, his main case against Trump, although he's been really screeching against him for his entire term, but now he's sort of backed off, and his one reasonable case is, well, short term Trump may be better, and obviously Biden is worse, and if we put communists in power, obviously short term that's worse than Trump.
You think?
But long term, by supporting someone like Trump, you're moving the right, this freedom loving side, to an authoritarian place. And I don't see any basis for that at all.
None.
Yes, it could go that way, I suppose. We're at a crossroads. We could get more authoritarian by asking our side to fight harder against the communists. We could end up with cult of personality. We could end up with a general who's like really powerful, and, you know, that could happen. But that's history for you. I mean, like, that could happen in any society. It almost happened after our revolution, when things were a lot better in terms of Enlightenment ideas and stuff. They told George Washington, please be king. And he said, no, I don't really want that. Thank God. That's it. I mean, there was that moment, and we're going to have that moment. We're likely to have that moment. We've got to be strong when that moment arrives. And we're not going to be strong if we vote in the communists. I mean, we're going to be Venezuela. So what are you going to do then? You're going to be dead or in a gulag? Well, one or the other. What are you going to do when you're in the gulag or you're dead? Like, I mean,
and
that's
it also
literally what's going to happen.
It evades the authoritarian left. I mean, if you're worried about an authoritarian figure on the right, which hasn't emerged yet, aren't you worried about electing real authoritarians on the left that want to cancel free speech? But what
they're saying is we won't have a champion or a fighter on the right if we continue to support authoritarians on the right. And I don't see Trump as an authoritarian, especially just look at the last year. He could have taken a lot of power with this coronavirus thing. And just look at what other governments.
authoritarianism? Where is it? I don't get it. Like,
yeah, I
because
mean, well, the money
bitches
and
about Bezos and the Post or something. I
right,
mean, come on. Like he could have,
the
like
tariffs,
he could have sent the federal National Guard into these
right.
cities, and he
That's what
said
I'm trying
no.
to say is that,
And
but
and where's the war? I mean, he's not. He's got peace in the Middle East. I mean, we haven't launched a new war during his entire term, and there's like no way in which he is authoritarian in any way. Like left to his own devices, would he just rule and decree, executive orders like, "Hey, everybody, this is the way I want." Yeah, probably, but so what?
I would if I were him.
I would
Would
too.
anybody here not do that? Like, there was this one book I read when I was a kid by Henry Hazlitt. Henry Hazlitt is a famous economist who wrote Economics in One Lesson, which is a great book, which explains a lot of,
The greatest.
yeah, it's one of the greatest books for just basic economics. Every kid should read this book in high school. But he actually wrote a fiction novel about this guy who who doesn't grow up with any power or authority and suddenly inherits authoritarian power over the United States, which is in a dictatorship, and he's happens to be the heir. So he becomes the heir of the United States, post-apocalyptic, like let's say he takes over the communist
King for a day.
yeah. And he sets about decreeing freedom. And it takes time, and so it's like Henry Hazlitt unwinding all of this authoritarian stuff to arrive at capitalism. And then, of course, he's criticized there's no such thing as a benevolent dictator, But if somebody handed me power today and said, do what you will, would I not use it? I mean, maybe in some cases I wouldn't because it would be distasteful for me. I just can't really force people, But in other ways I would, in ways that people would disagree with probably. Like I would definitely go after the tech companies for colluding to crush and silent free speech, for colluding with the banks and other politicians and things. I would crush them for that. I would maybe even call them treasonous and hang some people in the public square. I mean, I'm that kind of dictator. So that's why I'm never going to run for office, right? But the point is that Trump has actually been quite, I don't know what the word is, calm and sort of like, he's not taking as much power as he could have. Yeah, $3 trillion in spending. There are other things, but he hasn't used his full authority to go after the tech companies. People are pissed off. People are pissed off that he didn't go into the cities and put down the riots. He didn't do that because he was like, it's not really my place to do that. He didn't come on strong with like mask mandates and stuff because, again, not really his place, even though he's being criticized for not doing more. And I could criticize his coronavirus response too. I think the CDC has been a wreck, and I think he's given up his thinking to Fauci and Birx, a couple of corrupt oligarchs, and he shouldn't have done that. But,
Well, not only that, but where's he been on the deep state stuff? I mean, there should be people in chains being rounded up after that FISA and the Russian hoax and everything else, and he's let that go.
We need to see people pay for what they did to him. And
I don't think he's authoritarian enough.
Right. I don't either. I feel like
I think he's a wuss.
Yeah, I think he's been a wuss about some things too. So anyway, and this is stuff within his power as a free country's president. He is supposed to go after crime. And I'm not seeing that as much.
And by the way, Sonny, I don't know if you've seen this too culturally, the idea that he's ripening the right for some sort of authoritarian approach. Who do you know on the right? Point to one person who has been like, that's what they really like about Trump, that, he aspires to be this sort of authoritarian dictator, and they really love the idea of a strong man who could just control and round up the bad guys, and in some like Hitlerian dystopia kind of way. I mean, I don't know anyone prominent or popular on the right that sees Trump as that's the symbol of what he stands for. Not at all. I mean,
right.
That's not at all the takeaway from his term.
I don't know a single person who thinks of it like that. And actually, I think a lot of Trump supporters really appreciate their freedom, and they really are those people with the American spirit of don't tell me what to do. And if Trump didn't act as their cultural sword out there, they wouldn't like him either. You know, they'd start to view him as an oligarch and an authoritarian and feel dissatisfied. So the fact that there's so much enthusiasm in his second term versus you didn't see this stuff in 2016. The awakening and the incredible crowds that we're seeing this year. Yeah, he had big rallies before, but a lot of people showed up at those rallies just to kind of see. I didn't see boat parades. Like the crazy amount of enthusiasm this year is because the left is so bad, and also because Trump's unleashed people from their guilt for loving America. So, like, my case for Trump is we need 4 more years of that. I want 4 years where he doesn't feel like he has an election coming up, that hopefully he will lower the hammer and that we'll see some arrests. I want Comey and his smug face to be arrested. The fact that he thinks he's above that, and that he can just say, yeah, I did, you know, he can just blatantly say what he did, and he's not going to get away with it, or that he thinks he's going to get away with it. He knows he's going to get away with it. There's something really wrong. And if he can do something about that, if he can upend the FBI, I don't know what he can do, but
well, here's another
the tech companies, all that stuff goes away if he's not reelected.
Right. And the real authoritarians after 9/11, Patriot Act, CIA black sites, torture, the NSA, Snowden, Assange, Hillary Clinton, adventures in the Middle East, on and on and on. The FISA abuse, the Russia hoax with the James Clapper lying about the NSA, all this stuff. Like, who are the real authoritarians here? You know, if you're looking for authoritarians, look at Hillary Clinton, look at the Bushes, look at Joe Biden, who was the one who presided over preventing Snowden from being celebrated and welcomed back as a hero. And the Obama administration and their use of the IRS, and you know, on and on and on. It's endless.
But
and
I don't know
Trump is the authoritarian.
Well, but I don't know anyone who is saying that the left is good. Yeah, I mean, except for the left. I'm just saying, like, I'm not hearing this argument. The people who are saying I'm not voting or I'm going to vote for Biden, who you would generally assume are freedom-loving people, I don't hear them saying, oh, Biden's so great, or they really want to vote for communists. I think that I don't really understand it personally, but they do think, I think they have, honestly, I think a lot of them are snobs who really do just have a problem with this lower class way of talking and being that they're unfamiliar with, and they just think it's so gross and gauche, and they're sort of Europe worshipers, and they have fallen for this ruling class aesthetic. They don't realize they've fallen for it, but they themselves are sort of part, or should have been part, of this ruling class. They grew up with those tastes and habits. They went to college. They have a certain respect for this idea that diversity is important. You know, they're little multiculturalists. And so they really do believe that Trump is racist, and that the rest of us are racist, and that if we speak in a way that is not upper crust, that we're lowlifes, and that we really don't know what we're talking about, and we're anti-intellectual, which you hear from the Ayn Rand Institute all the time. Meanwhile, so I think that their thing is that they actually have bought into the people shouldn't be able to rule themselves. And they're sort of appalled at this choice of Trump because he's inappropriate. And I guess he's inappropriate sometimes. I think so too, but I don't have as big a problem with it. And I also see it for what it is. There's fight and pushback culturally. We need that. And we're getting more ideological renaissance on the right, which is great. And only because of that. And so we need more of that. And then if we do the opposite, you're going to solidify the power, because they're going to come into office. This is pretty obvious to anyone who's paying attention, and maybe people don't get this. As soon as these Dems come into power, there will never be another Republican in power really again, except establishment. They will control all the elections. They're going to pack the Supreme Court. They're going to get rid of the Electoral College. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff on their agenda that they can easily do. So that's kind of it. And then the next step is bloody revolution. That's the only recourse freedom lovers will have. Whereas with Trump, we have a chance to kind of continue to build momentum. That's it. I don't think that I don't think the long term is as long as people think it is if Biden wins.
No, I think the real issue, like what you're saying, is it's the administrations. It's not just the people, Trump himself and Biden himself. It's the people they're going to bring with them and the policies that they're going to bring with them. And Biden, who's a senile, doting idiot right now, is going to be surrounded by Kamala Harris and AOC and Ilhan Omar
Obama in the background,
and Hillary Clinton and these types of people who are going to get the band back together. And they have an agenda, and that agenda is very dangerous, and it's completely anti-freedom. And the Trump, despite all of his flaws, has a lot of really good people in his administration that do things, on the environmental front and in other areas, education, that are fantastic. And so, you got to look at the entire administration as well as the court nominees and the federal court nominees. And one other thing I wanted to say about that, the authoritarian thing, Americans have always been freedom-loving, pioneering, obnoxious, practical sort of assholes. And, this idea that we need some sort of staid, refined, intellectual, finesse politician is completely anti-American. I think it's ridiculous.
It is. It's very European. And a lot of the people, global, I guess. And a lot of the people calling for that are not Americans.
Exactly.
I hate to say it, and I've said it before, like we're talking about Yaron Brook earlier, and he's chairman of the board of the Ayn Rand Institute. He's not American. And he has a major problem with Trump's personality. Ankar Ghate, the intellectual at the Ayn Rand Institute, has a problem with Trump. He's not American either.
Nope.
So
they're all from that world of the ivory tower intellectual
global, but they didn't grow up in this culture, and they don't have that same understanding of that personality type. And I'm not saying that there aren't Americans who don't like Trump, because there are definitely Americans part of that culture that don't like the way he is. But this is a really good point that you just made, that where is this thing coming from that our president has to be this French guy? Like he's got to act like it. He's got the perfect suit, and he's polished, and he's got the perfect manners. Where did that come from?
Right. Yeah, I don't know where that came from.
And Obama epitomized that, and he's the worst ideologically. Yeah. So it's really the least important thing. But then people will argue though that Trump, ideologically, they don't like him because the tariffs and the economic controls and the complaining about Jeff Bezos. But again, where is the evidence that he's actually taken authoritarian power in any really big way since he's taken office? Nothing he's done has been out of the ordinary. And it's pretty clear that his stance on tariffs was a negotiating stance, because he seems to be negotiating free trade. So, how can you say, oh, he's for big tariffs? He's negotiating free trade. And in the case of China, we obviously need to change how we're trading with them. The coronavirus has proven that. Absolutely. If anything, couldn't have before that.
He's using the one thing in the arsenal that could push back against this, China trade situation, which has enveloped corporate America, which has trillions and trillions of dollars at stake. So there's kind of almost no way to unwind those relationships now that are very potentially damaging geopolitically and from a national security standpoint, with China and, the regime there, the communist regime there, and the danger that they pose to the country. I mean, tariffs is like the most innocuous thing you could do right now to try and start to push back and help unwind some of these relationships. I mean,
right. Just the Biden dump. We're seeing how China has been buying influence. They also have been spying on us through their embassies. Then we keep closing down their embassies. We've been arresting university professors in science labs who have been spying for China and sending them data out of MIT and out of the top universities. I mean, and then the coronavirus itself and the fact that they lied about it and the fact that they let international flights out of Wuhan while not allowing domestic flights out of Wuhan. I mean, oh my God, we should all be launching our nuclear bombs at them right now. I am so anti-China. It's unbelievable. If we stop trading with them altogether, I'm fine with that. Even though my daughter won't get her Disney princess doll and house that she wants for Christmas, The other day, dude, I tried to buy 2 things I couldn't buy online. Reynolds Wrap wax paper and ink for my printer. I could buy black, but not colored. And apparently there's a big ink cartridge shortage. And obviously there's a wax paper shortage. So
black
all these
ink
things
matters.
Right. So anyway, like obviously we're all like, why can't I get this, but I can get this? Like this coronavirus stuff is really strange. And I'm sure like most of our stuff is manufactured overseas. But, whatever. I'll do without it.
I think we'll survive. I think we'll survive not having plastic dolls from China.
Right.
Running in. But China, by the way, we maybe should post a link to this. There's an article recently about that 2 Chinese guys had written a book 20 years ago about, essentially like China engaging in a non-military war with the United States. And it's really interesting.
Have you read it?
No, I didn't read the book. I read an article about the book and kind of detailing it.
Can you if you find that article, I'll post it.
Because the idea is that they're gonna engage in war with the United States in every way conceivable other than military, and it's fascinating.
It's kind of like our own government silencing us and engaging in authoritarian behavior in any way except directly, and the way that we're all being censored in every way except directly. But in fact, we're being censored. And I have no doubt that the Democrats are working directly with Silicon Valley. No doubt at all. They're doing it visibly. And so what's going on behind the scenes is probably even more so. Decisions are being made in smoke-filled rooms, maybe not smoke-filled, maybe pot smoke-filled rooms with these drugged out pedophilic politicians and their drugged out pedophilic Silicon Valley counterparts.
Well, no one's going to ever
the real conspiracy theories out there.
No one's ever going to come out in this day and age, at least not today, and say we're going to pass a law to censor Americans.
Right.
No more right-wing speech.
Work.
It wouldn't work.
So they're doing it in another way. And it's why China doesn't attack us directly. They get crushed. But the like little tentacles and fingers everywhere that nobody complains about, nobody notices, and then they pay people to ignore. And they're doing it very strategically. I mean, I haven't read the book, but I can see it. I can see it for myself. So I'm glad Trump's been dealing with some of this, and it's really important that we have 4 more years of Trump. So that's my case. Do you have anything to add to that before we sign off for the day?
No, just that. It's a much bigger, you have to think contextually, and it pisses me off when people isolate the individual sort of like philosophic pathologies of an individual candidate and like extrapolate those and evade not only the pathologies of the opponent, but also don't understand the full context of what an administration brings in terms of all the policies of all these agencies across the entire country, including the court nominations and what that means, to say, oh, Trump, to isolate something like Trump Trump was nice to Kim Jong-un or something, while they were on the platform, and therefore I hate Trump and he's a dictator wannabe or something like that. That's such a stupid way to look at politics. That in isolation, not good, but look at the full context of everything that's going on, including the opposition, and consider like what's best for us, anyone who wants freedom in the future and who's worried about an authoritarian federal government. And that's the way you got to think about it.
Yeah. All right. So on that note, I think we'll call it done. And boy, we got an interesting weekend coming up. We got Halloween and then the election next week. So the next time we do a podcast, well, I don't know if we're going to know who's going to be the next president, but we'll know who won on election night, which I think will be Trump. And then I think it will be a slow who knows what over the next 3 weeks after that.
The vans full of ballots
will show up, right?
Will show up.
Yeah. All right, everybody, have a great weekend. Have a great Halloween, and we'll talk to you next week after the incredible result is in. Okay.
Called the House of Sunny. It's filled with satire and fun. It's been the demise of bad ideas, and we'll know what's right when she's done. So download this free podcast now and give perspectives you may lack. It's concise and right and achieves world peace, guaranteed all your money back. Last time, ready?